Fables to Facts, exploring truth behind beliefs.
Hello, Edward. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Arthur.
So we're getting into our next episode of Fables to Facts that is titled as The Abandoned and the Chosen. Moses, Sargon, and their mythic echoes. Throughout history, myths and legends have often featured children abandoned at birth, only to be saved and later rise to greatness. These stories carry themes of destiny, divine intervention, and power struggles, appearing across cultures from Mesopotamia and Egypt to Greece, Rome, India, and Persia.
So where are we going to begin today? What story?
We begin with Moses. Moses, that the one who brought Jews through the desert, who was raised by pharaohs. The story of Moses that we can read in the Exodus. In ancient Egypt, the Hebrew population had grown so numerous that Pharaoh feared they might rebel. To suppress them, he ordered the killing of all newborn Hebrew boys. Only Levite woman, Jochebed, bore a son and hid him for 3 months. But as he grew, hiding him became impossible. Desperate to save him, she coated a basket with pitch and set him afloat on the Nile, entrusting his fate to the river. Pharaoh's daughter, bathing in the river, discovered the basket and upon seeing the crying infant, took pity of him. She recognized he was Hebrew.
Oh, how? What do you think? How?
That is an interesting question. How do we know when someone is Hebrew or not? Maybe it's a baby infant. Maybe she just saw the baby naked and saw him circumcised.
Very true, yeah.
Nevertheless, she chose to adopt him. Miriam, the mother of Moses, still watching, approached and offered to find a nurse for the baby, leading Pharaoh's daughter to unknowingly hire Jochebed, Moses' own mother, to care for him. In this way, Moses was nurtured by his biological mother, but raised as an Egyptian prince, a dual identity that would later define his destiny. Yeah.
And Moses is an important prophet in all three Abrahamic religions. God gave him the Ten Commandments, the law that the Bible was in biblical times was based on. What else happened? This story, as you stated in the title, the abandoned and the chosen. You've shown Moses be abandoned by his mother. He was a Hebrew, which was of the lower classes at the time in ancient Egypt. And he was adopted by a priestess, the Pharaoh's daughter. So he was brought up in royalty.
I find many symbols in this story. One of them goes throughout many myths, legends, and later on some epics. What was that kind of story, from the beggar to the prince or something like that?
Yes. As you're saying, you're from the lower demographic to the highest. He was born in the lower demographic in ancient Egypt and adopted and grew up in the highest demographic.
So from the preacher's perspective, I would say like this, from the author of the story, it should be inspiring. This is the inspiration. As a piece of literature, it should be also inspiring.
Yeah.
It is good. Like, brings hope to people that whomever you are, wherever you were born, you can be raised by anyone, even by wolves, and still become great, successful, and who knows, maybe happy, maybe not, but at least you will be remembered for ages.
Yes.
Else do we see? The Nile, the basket. Does it remind you of any other biblical story?
Well, I would go Romulus and Remus. Romulus.
No. I'm talking about the biblical story.
Oh, no. Go on, enlighten me.
Just think about it. There is
the flood.
Yes, it is. We have the basket. We have, let's say, the world, but in this case, the personal world of a child. The world is ruined. The life is ruined. Everybody dies around, at least the Jewish boys.
And in certain translations of the Moses story in the Torah, in the Old Testament, they do mention the basket as being an ark.
Yes, very strange word, but the ark, as we can see now, it can be smaller, it can be big. Then again, the prophet, Noah basically was the prophet in some way. So he was also the messenger of God, at least the messenger of the words, of the commands.
Yeah.
And the Moses became the messenger of the commandments.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the second narrative that we see.
God
The
didn't
symbol.
everyone, did he? He chose some people who he spoke to pass on this his wisdom to the populace.
And another metaphor, in the flood myths, we see that humanity has been erased, but then it was saved. Humans repopulated the earth. So the flood was kind of.
Yes.
And here, Moses was also at least born into the struggling family and the struggling nation or ethnic group, and was maybe not cleansed because he didn't sin when he was born.
Yes.
But somehow his story was erased.
So almost like the river, the Nile, could represent his salvation in a way.
Yes. And he was saved. Before we started recording the episode, you said, oh, should we use the word abandoned?
Okay, yes. And I thought about that because I was like, what about abandoned? So his mother placed him in a basket because the Pharaoh was going to kill every firstborn son of the Hebrews. And so did she abandon him? And what do you suggest?
I said he was literally abandoned because just imagine, let's say 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, there is the river Nile. It was, I don't know how sophisticated was the society, but I don't think it was too safe to put some baby into the Nile where there are alligators, crocodiles, and other beasts. Yes, mother abandoned him, at least for a while.
Well, right, because then after we spoke, I thought about it and think about some mothers put their parents, especially 100 years ago, and they still do now, in orphanages. Sometimes for a better life, they think they can't, afford it or look after them, and in theory, essentially, they abandon them, haven't they?
Now I'm thinking, not all the mothers throughout the history of human civilization abandoning their children hoping for better life, left their children who succeeded in something. So in this case, Moses became the hero in many circumstances.
Yeah.
One of them is surviving the Nile. This is the wild world. This is the wild river. He survived. If you're Orthodox, if you're whether you're Christian or Jew, so you think of him as a hero who saved the nation. Maybe nation is not the correct word. The ethnic group. What is the?
His people. Yeah.
The people. Yeah. Let my people go. So he's the hero chosen by God. So we can speculate whether it's luck or the prophecy or the God's will. He was the chosen one. What happens next? The Egyptian princess takes him, adopts him. Then we have a Jewish or Hebrew mother.
Yes.
The nurse at the same time. And then we can relate to our investigation on Moses and monotheism. So how Moses became the prominent figure in both the Hebrew and the Pharaoh-ruled Egyptian world.
Yes.
Do you have thoughts about it?
Yes, we've explored this in episode 1, I believe, Akhenaten. And this story of Moses that we discussed before was probably only like 50 years after Akhenaten. So if people are interested, we'll put you can click it there for episode 1, where we're going further in-depth discussion on that.
I have another idea. So he was raised at the same time by the Egyptians and the Hebrew. I would love to read about this if it was written anywhere, or there was some evidence of how he was raised. Because you have the real mother who wants his son to keep the traditions of their people.
Yeah.
Then you have the mother who is the Egyptian princess. How were they raising him? Was maybe Miriam at some age told Moses that, oh, you're not Egyptian, you're not the descendant of the monarchy, you're the Hebrew, so you need to take care of our people.
Yes. So we had this conflict, didn't he? This dual heritage upbringing in a way that contrasted greatly. It would have been a great conflict to him.
I would bet that he still knew about both cultures.
Yes, definitely.
From the very beginning. I don't know the way he was told about that. Definitely the princess adopted him and she was raising him by their Egyptian standards, whatever they were. Definitely he should have gotten a great education before becoming the priest, the prophet,
Yes.
and getting back to his biological ancestors.
Yes. He would have had one of the top educations in ancient Egypt by being brought up in the court. So let's have a look from the story of Exodus. It's roughly 1290 BCE. But then the earliest recorded dates, that's why we assume that, and we assume going off some of the story, it was the reign of Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great. But the earliest reference in Greek literature, the earliest recorded reference, is only the 4th century BCE. So it's a good 9 years, really, before 900 years after the story was supposedly in.
And again, we're trying to look for similar stories that predated, at least in our case, the biblical ones.
Yes. So 13th century is based in, and the earliest recorded evidence we can find is the 4th century BCE. So let's go on to another story and let's explore the similarities and the differences. And our next topic, our next story will be the legend of Sargon of Akkad, Mesopotamian myth, 7th century BCE, around. So this is the recorded. It would have orally been passed on and is set way before this. So the Akkadian king Sargon, one of history's first recorded empire builders, claimed in an inscription to have been born in secret. According to the legend, his mother was a high priestess, forbidden from bearing children. To save his life, she placed him in a reed basket, sealed it with bitumen, and set it adrift in the Euphrates River. This act echoes the Near Eastern tradition of water as both destructive and purifying force. So already there's similarities here between Sargon and Moses. And I'll just read a bit more. The river carried the infant to a water drawer named Archi, who took him in and raised him as his own. Sargon grew up in humble surroundings, yet his extraordinary abilities were evident from a young age. He eventually became a cupbearer to the king Kirsch, a trusted position in the royal court, which placed him in proximity to power. However, rather than simply inheriting a throne, Sargon seized it through conquest. His conquest formed one of the first great empires, uniting Sumerian and Akkadian city-states under his rule. He established a centralized administration, standardizing weights and measures, and enforcing a uniform language unprecedented for his time. His legendary status persisted for centuries, influencing later Mesopotamian rulers who sought to model themselves after him. The story of Sargon highlights themes of divine favor and destiny, like other figures who were abandoned but survived. Sargon was believed to be chosen by the gods. His humble beginnings made him an ideal ruler in Mesopotamian ideology, where divine selection often justified a king's legitimacy.
Yeah, it is literally similar. I heard the words high priestess, chosen by God. When you mentioned the similarities are obvious, what you were referring to?
What's slightly different here is his mother was a high priestess, where the Moses story, his mother was a Hebrew. And as we mentioned, we're in the lower demographics of ancient Egypt at the time. So, but then he was found by a commoner, and his upbringing was one of humble surroundings, unlike Moses, who grew up in the royal courts of ancient Egypt. So those are just the slight differences. Instead of like one rising from humble beginnings, this is quite the opposite, where he was born by a high priestess and he, grew up as a commoner. But everything else is similar. The basket, the big river, the Euphrates, instead of the Nile, and his rise to greatness and chosen by God.
Let us think. Depending on the circumstances and who's the author of the story, at which point, which group the author belongs to, is his group, let's say, enslaved?
Yeah.
Is his group coming into power? Or it was erased, or it was conquered, or something like that? We just take the narrative and sweat some.
So in Mesopotamian ideology, humble beginnings made him an ideal ruler. The events of Sargon was around 222, 79 BCE, right? This is attested by several cuneiform tablets. But this is different. But think about it. He grew up humble,
Mm-hmm.
and Moses was born humble. There are the only slight differences, but he's still of this humble sort of childhood or birth, both had.
But in case of Sargon, okay, he was raised humble, but to become the different ruler, but of the same state he was born into.
Yes, that's different. Yes.
Getting back to changing the narrative, I will repeat about the Sargon. So Sargon was a son of the priestess, already high class, high level citizen. And it is quite understandable that that was some fight for the throne within the developed or the most developed country, at least in that region at that time.
Okay.
And it's quite natural that someone not from the beggars, not from the low class, not from the lowest caste goes to the top. So there should be some kind of higher caste, higher citizen to become the king, because it was just not common in their culture. You're nobody, you cannot become the monarch. But as for the Hebrews in Egypt, in the ancient Egypt, I cannot say they were low class, but they were out of the society. They had no established cities. They had no land at that time.
That's it. They never classed Egypt as their homeland. They was in search of the promised land. And that's what they used to say in Moses. And so to fit this narrative of the founding of Israel, in Jerusalem, they were the Israelites, weren't they? The Hebrews, this tribe in ancient Egypt, like you say, lower class or even enslaved. And so this fits the narrative, why it would be altered from the Sargon story.
Sounds logical. What other similarities do we have, or the differences?
Okay, so yeah, one became a king and one didn't. So Moses didn't become a king, but they both rose to greatness.
Can we say Moses became a ruler
He was sort of like a chieftain, wasn't he?
or the leader?
He certainly led them out of Egypt. Yeah,
He was not forcing people to do something.
no,
That's why he cannot be called the king, because When the king, any kind of monarch, the prince, their words are the law. Moses, he was just trusted by his people who followed him.
See, the kings of Judea came a few hundred years after, David and Solomon. So it wasn't a foundation of kings at this time with the Israelites. There was no king.
Moses was a chieftain, and it was kind of democracy, or at least it was not autocracy.
Yes.
Yeah. What was the ruling style of later kings like David and Solomon?
They're autocratic, yeah.
It is interesting. It was founded by some kind of semi-democratic, based on the trust in the prophet of the God.
Yes.
In the
Well, that's
beliefs.
it. So these prophets were chosen by God, wasn't they? And that's why they had so much
They had influence. They had
Influence.
influence, but not the power.
That's right.
They couldn't force.
Yes.
So Moses was not powerful.
Yes.
He was influential and he was wise. We go on to other similar stories that might have predated or were created or written down parallel to the Sargon or Moses's stories. So we've got Moses. This is Egypt. This is Northern Africa. We take Mesopotamia. This is Middle East. So we've got two regions. Then there is the third one. And from our last episodes, we figured out that three regions were interconnected, the most ancient ones in the Eurasia. So ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Hindu Valley.
Yeah, India.
There was another story recorded in Mahabharata, the Hindu epic. There is the story of so-called Karna. Let me read it out.
Yes.
And then let's see how similar or how different it is from other two. In the Mahabharata, Kunti, a princess of the Kuru dynasty, received a divine boon, allowing her to summon gods and bear children by them. Very interesting. Out of curiosity, she invoked the sun god Surya and immediately conceived a child. Unmarried and fearful of disgrace, she placed her newborn son in a basket and set it adrift on the river. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Or here we go before. The basket traveled downstream until it was discovered by a charioteer, Adhiratha, and his wife Radha, who raised the boy as their own. Named Karna, he grew up believing himself to be of low birth, despite possessing extraordinary strength and warrior skills. He longed to learn archery, but because of his supposed caste, he was denied training by the great master Drona. Undeterred, Karna sought out Parashurama, a sage who taught only Brahmins the priesthood.
Again, priestess, princess. It's
only caste. Priestess, princess, charioteer, low class. Low. Here he was born as a human. He was born into the low caste.
Even though he was a miraculous conception, a son of a god. Yeah.
And the son of the god. This is another similarity and the difference. To gain knowledge, Karna lied about his origins. So he was a trickster.
Mm-hmm.
When the truth was revealed, Parashurama cursed him, stating that in his moment of greatest need, his knowledge of weapons would fail him. Karna's identity remained hidden even as he became one of the most powerful warriors of his time. Eventually, he aligned himself with the Duryodhana, the enemy of the Pandavas, unaware that they were his half-brothers. When the truth was finally revealed, Karna remained loyal to his chosen path, despite knowing his true lineage. His tragic fate was sealed during the Kurukshetra war when his chariot wheel got stuck, fulfilling Parashurama's curse, and he was killed by Arjuna, which was the archer of one of the main Hindu gods. Was it Krishna?
What similarities do we have here? An abandoned child. Yes.
Number one.
Yeah, similar. Cast downstream. And then, yes, saved.
Saved, raised, in this case by the low class.
Similar to Sargon.
And still having divine power within him.
Yes.
Or if it's about Sargon, he was also close to the divine, close to the god, because he was the son of the priestess.
So Moses and Sargon could be considered chosen by God. This one was, conceived by a god. It's the same like backbone of the story, and it just altered slightly. It's the same theme runs through all three stories.
Which proves again that there are archetypical stories around the world. Where they came from is another question. For example, if we are talking about the flood myths, most probably there was some flood. And when the dates differ, for example, in the Bible, it is 40 days and 40 nights. In some other myths, it's only 10 days. In some other myths, it was years. It only leads me to one thought, that it happened so long ago that you need to use just the symbolic language.
Right, it just orally passed on, oral tradition. And this is where it comes hard to find the evidence of what came first, because we only have certain cuneiform tablets and other Greek writers and their manuscripts and everything. And so it's very hard to ascertain what came first. The evidence so far on the three stories, what's your opinion? Did you think Moses came first, the Moses story?
No, from what stories, what kind of stories we already checked, looked through, studied, that have their roots in the Bible,
yeah,
or biblical stories themselves, they are not the original ones.
No.
Mesopotamian myths and legends, I would assume they had been developed parallelly to the Hindu ones. So they had closer origins and traditions, maybe together with Egypt. Maybe these three civilizations just adopted the records or oral traditions of their ancestors.
Well, the most likely would have been trade amongst these big empires almost. Yeah. And through that trade, you got oral stories, oral traditions, language, and everything else is traded at the same time. So.
I would disagree a bit. Yeah. For example, if we look at some stories that are brought to us by Vikings.
Yeah.
Vikings had oral traditions, then they had a runic script, and there was some Christian priest who recorded the stories of the Vikings.
Yeah, because the first Vikings weren't Christian, were they? They're pagan. Yeah.
Of course they were not, but the Christian was the one to record them. He was also the Viking, but just baptized, and he was educated, and he was the one to record these stories. What we can see there are narratives that were borrowed from the nearby regions. There are some stories similar to Roman, Greek, Indian myths and legends. So they were adopting the stories. Maybe they had their previous older tradition, but still there we can see that many stories are borrowed. In terms of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Hindu Valley civilizations, the Hindu texts, it's just my point of view. I see them as they have origins in something or someone or some records or people or civilization that predated them. They hadn't changed these stories.
Sure.
They took them, they inherited them, then they modified them. That's my thought.
Interesting.
But we can check it comparing these three stories. So, whom do we have? We have Moses, we have Sargon, we have Karna. Three heroes,
Yes.
abandoned children who became successful in their own ways.
All of them rose to prominence, didn't they?
Whom else do we have?
Okay, this is interesting. So we've done three that they all seem like a very similar story. They came from the same story. And then you interestingly, Arthur, brought up the other day when we was talking about, okay, what else? The abandoned child down a river. And you came up this, you said it sounds so eerily similar to Romulus and Remus.
That's what I was referring to in the very beginning of our episode. Also raised by the wolf.
Yes.
Or the female wolf in their case. Do you have the story? Can you recite the story of them?
Yeah, so they were twins, Romulus and Remus, and they were sons of Rhea Silvia, and she was a Vestal Virgin. So if anyone knows about Roman history and the Vestal Virgins, they were priestesses. And also, they were the sons of Mars, the god of war. So again, similar
Again and
to
again.
Karna. Their uncle, fearing that they would challenge his rule, ordered them to be killed. Instead, they were abandoned in a basket on the Tiber River in Rome. Yeah. Well, at the time, it wasn't called Rome. And then the river carried them to safety, where a she-wolf found and nursed them. So again, a nurse. Later, a shepherd named Faustilus took them in and raised them. So a shepherd, a lowborn. As adults, they overthrew their great uncle and decided to establish a city. A dispute over its location led to Romulus killing Remus, killing his twin brother, and thus Rome was founded. And Rome's named after Romulus. Well, the founding, the legendary mythology of Rome, Romulus was its founder. So similarities here: a Vestal Virgin, a priestess.
Again, the priestess.
Yeah.
Of the god.
And this time it meant, yeah, Mars, god of war. So very similar stories. And again, it runs through that theme of Sargon about the abandonment, put in a basket, down a river. And these are big rivers. These aren't small rivers, we've mentioned all four. And being rescued, and this time nursed by a she-wolf. So instead of a human.
And then picked up by a shepherd.
Yes, by a shepherd, by a lowly shepherd. So brought up, even though they were sons of a priestess and sons of a god, they were brought up very humbly.
One thing about the shepherds, the lonely shepherd. In many religious traditions of the world, there is this symbolic being, one of the avatars of couple gods. For example, in Vodun, in Haiti, or in Benin, there is Papa Legba or Elegua, the trickster, the god of the crossroads, but his another avatar is the shepherd, and his symbol on all the veves, which is sacred symbols to invoke him, includes the shepherd's stick.
Because a shepherd is sort of like a guide as well, isn't it?
A guide, or the one who is followed, the same as Moses. Many times is depicted with this walking stick.
Yes.
Then, if I'm not mistaken, but I think Wotan, which is Odin, also one of his avatars, is depicted like an old bearded guy with the stick or the shepherd stick.
Yes. Oh, okay.
And there are many kinds of shepherd gods. We've got the shepherd, we've got the she-wolf.
Yeah.
We've got, in this case, two kids, but then one tragically dies, killed, eliminated, but then we still have the same narrative. Where would you place the Romulus and Remus story in the timeline?
Okay, so Romulus's reign, he was the first king of Rome. Rome had 7 kings, and then the Republic was born. And they never liked kings after that. That's why when the first emperor Augustus came, that was about 600 years after. So the reign of Romulus is written down as 753 to 716 BCE. However, the earliest written account is only the 3rd century BCE and likely originated in the 4th century BCE. So this is actually around the same time as the Moses story, with the first written evidence of the Moses story.
And again, it might prove my theory that sometimes it's just the same origin used by different peoples.
And so Romulus founded Rome. Moses was in search of the promised land and took the Israelites out of Egypt and modern day Israel. So there's similarities there as well. The founding of a new place.
The founding of the new place. The difference is that Romulus and Remus were not looking for anything. They were just they had to establish something to live somewhere.
Yes, and they there wasn't lots of people who were following them at this time. Rome was very small at the time.
Another similarity. But this is not the only story of the abandoned children.
Okay.
By the way, wait. Romulus and Remus. Okay, we were talking about Romulus and Remus, two brothers. One kills another. We compared it to the Moses story.
Yes.
The biblical one. Doesn't it remind you of anything else from the Bible?
Cain and Abel.
Yes. Twin brothers.
One kills the other.
Then happens what? Do you remember?
I can't quite remember. Sorry, Arthur. Can you remember?
Let's move on to the abandoned children. There is another Greek story, ancient Greek mythology, which is written in Hesiod's Theogony and later retellings, the story of Perseus. It starts with the king Acrisius of Argos, fearing a prophecy that his grandson would kill him, locked his daughter Danaia in a bronze tower. However, Zeus impregnated her in the form of golden rain, and she gave birth to Perseus. To prevent the prophecy, again, we have the god, the priestess, something new, rain, the methods can be different, let it be, and the prophecy. And that the king wants to kill everyone else around, boys, in this case, the same as the Egyptian pharaohs.
Again, right, daughter of a king, a princess, Zeus, a god, impregnated, again, this priestess or god or princess. It's a running theme through these stories.
And that's not the end. To prevent the prophecy, Acrisius cast Danaia and the baby Perseus into the sea in a wooden chest. A bit different, they survived and washed ashore on the island of Seriphus, where a fisherman named Dictys raised Perseus. Perseus later became a hero, slaying the Gorgon Medusa, the serpent. We already talked a lot about serpents in our previous episodes and mentioned Perseus, but not his childhood story. So after killing Gorgon Medusa, and ultimately fulfilling the prophecy by accidentally killing his grandfather. So the prophecy was fulfilled.
Yes.
What do we have here?
Okay, similarities again. As we said, we've got the princess. Gives Zeus, the god, impregnates her and gives birth to Perseus. So this is slightly different. So again, we've got the theme of water. Yes, the significance of water, but this one is a wooden chest, not a basket. They survived and washed ashore, and a fisherman. Again, a lay job. Yes, a commoner job at the time, and raised this son of a god, grandson of a king.
Let me interrupt you for a while. I was thinking about other symbolism of these stories. Maybe it has something to do with the timestamps that our ancestors used. So, for example, we know there's the theory about the Sphinx that before it had the head of the lion because it was facing the constellation of the lion and it was something like 12,000 BCE. Yeah.
And the head of the human doesn't fit the lion's body. Yes. So somehow
Yes.
it was there previously, yes?
That's what I'm trying to mention. There are also other temples that you have seen personally in Egypt
Yep.
that have rams or sheep, right?
Yes.
They resemble another constellation,
Oh, the ram.
the ram. Now we think about another age of humanity where the symbol, the zodiac, is the ram. Before it was Leo, then it became ram, or vice versa. I'm not that good at astrology. Then what is the shepherd?
The ram, the sheep.
Right. It might have a hint to the timeline where when this
Yeah.
or why was mentioned at some period of time.
Yes. And Moses,
Now,
as you say, yeah.
and now about the fisherman in this story. What kind of constellation would that be?
Oh, Pisces.
Yes, fish. And now the symbol of Jesus Christ is fish.
Yes. You got the fishes and loaves, and yeah.
Yeah, which with the new age, new of Pisces.
Yeah. In the I see on cars the fish.
And they are not the main heroes of the story, not the main characters. They are like passing by. Okay, there was a shepherd.
Yes.
Okay, there was a fisherman. So all the ancient stories are filled with symbolism that have some background. We just need to decipher it.
And and through translations, the symbolisms became lost, yes, in the modern day translation sort of thing. And the modern symbolism, the ancient symbolism in modern times has become lost. So our sixth story of today's episode is the story of Oedipus. And again from Greek mythology. A prophecy warned King Laius of Thebes that his son would kill and marry his wife. When his son was born, Laius pierced the infant's ankles and ordered him to be abandoned on a mountainside. However, a shepherd found him and took him to King Polybus of Corinth, who raised him as his own son. Unaware of his true origins, Oedipus later fled Corinth to avoid the prophecy. In a twist of fate, he unknowingly killed his real father, King Laius, and later married his own mother, Queen Jocasta. Upon discovering the truth, Jocasta took her own life, and Oedipus blinded himself in despair. So the shame, mother marrying her own son, she killed herself, unknowingly married.
The similarities are quite obvious. Again, the prophecy, again, some king
Yes.
that was afraid of his life. Then we have the shepherd again. The difference is that there is no river, no basket.
No, so this one is on a mountainside, slightly different.
Maybe the scholar who wrote this story down just had no river nearby or was unaware of anything related to rivers, and it was all about mountains. And mountains are also the sacred site.
It would be very interesting to have a look at that in the future and have a look at Thebes and Corinth and let's see what rivers, if any, were around there.
But maybe they just use another sacred site because
Yes.
both rivers and mountains,
They are sacred, yes.
and especially the whole Greece is built around the Mount
Olympus. Ancient Greece, there's lots of Olympus. You had the Oracle of Delphi, again, on a mountain.
And it depends which kind of culture dominates, which kind of religious cult dominates in some area where you need to praise the god of the mountain, god of the hill, or the god of the river, or the goddess of the sea. So it might vary.
And to fit it depends, like you say, what's sacred in each civilization. So borrowing, as we said earlier, the backbone of the story and adding to it, and changing slight bits.
And very interesting point. What is sacred and why something becomes sacred? For example, animals become sacred, or some landmass or water mass or the tree. And it all depends on what saved people's lives. So maybe they just were not relying on the rivers that much. Maybe there were plenty of waters around them, a lot of rain, and they were not worshiping water in any form. But mountains, maybe the defense, or maybe there was a holy site where the gods, our ancestors thought that the gods live in the mountains.
Yes, and especially ancient Greek. In ancient Greece, in Greek mythology, it was. And then, interesting, like you said, mountains and rivers were natural defenses in ancient times. So they were sacred. Yeah, they were protectors.
And let us think about the different areas where there were people living more nomadic or more farmers or warriors. Let's say warriors would mostly rely on the natural defenses. Farmers or developed civilizations which were not the nomads who were just moving around. They were into raising the crops. So in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, the life itself relied on the amount of water they have, just to pour into their crops, to irrigate.
That's why rivers played such an important part in ancient civilizations. It's like the flooding of the Nile. That's how Egypt became a great empire, is because of the flooding of the Nile, the crops and the water that it produced. So let's go back to this. So this is from Greek mythology. So it likely again dates back a lot further than the earliest written documented evidence. This is from Sophocles, Opidius Rex, 5th century BCE. So Rex means king. So yeah, he married his own mother. He killed the king. He probably did become king. So let's have a look. So it's only 5th century BC. Orally, most likely, like most Greek mythology, was centuries, if not longer, before this.
Or they were recorded in the 5th century BCE by some scholars,
That's it.
by some historians.
Just like the Trojan War, Homer and the Iliad. He was writing down events that happened hundreds of years before.
And we have the last story that we want to cover that was also written by the Greek historian Herodotus. The story of Cyrus the Great. The date is also roughly 5th century BCE. Let's listen to the story. The king Astyages of Media had a dream foretelling that his grandson Cyrus would overthrow him. Again, prophecy, but in this case, a dream or some spiritual experience. To prevent this, he ordered his general Harpagus to kill the newborn. Yes, not all the newborns, not the firstborn of every family, but still, kill the baby.
Just Cyrus, yes.
Yes, the baby. However, Harpagus, unwilling to kill a royal baby, secretly handed him to a shepherd. Again, who raised him as his own. As Cyrus grew, his noble nature became apparent. Eventually, he discovered his true origins, raised an army, and overthrew his grandfather, fulfilling the prophecy. He went to establish the Persian Empire. Here we go. Raised by shepherd, descendant of either the god or the king or whomever was there in that area of their worshipping or circumstances.
A prophecy and the founding. So he established the Persian Empire. Persian was massive, he invaded Greece, didn't it? Again, look at Moses sort of taking the Israelites out of Egypt, founding modern day Israel, in essence, Judea. And then you've got Romulus founding Rome. So this is like similar in all of this, the founding of something or becoming, making something greater than it was.
The question is, who was the first to tell some story that became an archetype? We don't have the exact answer. There are some earlier, some later.
Yes.
What I am thinking about, something had happened in the past that was adopted into the record, either oral or written.
Yes.
And that was either something global, if it is the flood. So many different historians, scholars, or whomever just survived wanted to transfer the knowledge about something that happened in the past. In case of these more individual stories, I think there was some huge civilization with their own mythology, or maybe a couple of them. In this case, I don't know, maybe they were Aryans, maybe some other, maybe Atlanteans, whomever they were. Wherever this story came from, this is the common practice when there is a monarch or some prominent figure within the people. Let's say Moses was the prophet, then all others were either princes, kings, or well-known warriors.
Yes, or half humans. Yeah.
Right. What I'm leading to, there is this, whomever that is, Julius Caesar or any king. He just says to his scholars, write me a good story about me.
So propaganda.
Propaganda. Warriors write the history. Then we have to the mind of the scholars. They are very wise, intelligent, dedicated people, knowing most probably knowing many myths, legends, fables, various kind of stories, read plenty of books, or if they lived in the time when there was no written records, they were listening to the stories, let's say, from their teachers, from the high priests, and so on. That's how the knowledge was transferred. And not so many people, which might probably be even not educated.
And there's a lot of symbolism embedded in these stories. As you mentioned, shepherd. Moses with the stick. It doesn't actually say shepherd, but symbolism, which
Why it goes from one story to another? I have two theories. One of them is it really some sacred knowledge that is decoded in these stories and passed from generation to generation. And there is the second, more simple explanation. Let's say the king comes to me, says, write some cool story about me. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, okay. Do I know? I know the flood. Oh, I know this cool story about the son of the god who was raised by the shepherd or whatever. Okay, I'll just change some parts and make another story for you, my dear king.
Yes.
And then he just listens to it. Amazing. How could you come up with that? And he says, oh, that's my imagination. No, I just read it in.
I remember as well. So you've got in the big families in ancient Greece, like the stories, mythology, Trojan Wars, those all descended. Look, the main characters, most of them are descended from gods. And you have a look at the patrician class in ancient Rome. Julius Caesar, the Julii, descended from the god. The Junus family, Brutus, came from Juno. People always wanted a lineage back to the gods. So this is like perfect. And they fabricate a story. It gives them some legitimacy.
Yeah, and not the legitimacy, but it raises them above the people. And it's in human nature to be a part of something big, huge. What was the biggest thing for the people? Related to the higher power.
Yeah. So
physical human and what goes above the gods.
Yeah. So if they're not descended from a god or a king, they're chosen by God, like Moses.
Correct. We have summarized the stories and the possible reasons of their creation, but what I would suggest to investigate in the future episodes is not the part when some lazy scholar just copied the story from before to make his king happy, but another hypothesis. If there is any hidden or more hidden knowledge hidden within these stories.
But that would be a great topic to explore. The symbolism of the astrology, star signs embedded within these stories. What do they mean?
Right. On this curious note, let us finish. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, support us.
Thank you.
Have a good day and an interesting life.